The big question is here. Wednesday morning, big news came in MLS circles as they've introduced MLS cash trades. So the big question for the day, what does the introduction of MLS cash for trades mean for the future of the league? And to help us understand this, we are very happy to welcome American soccer writer Charles Boehm to Morning Kickaround. Hello and good morning, sir.
Good morning, gentlemen. It's a pleasure to be on with you today.
Hi, Charlie. Hi.
Hey, Jason.
Nice,
how are you?
Nice to see you, buddy. Nice to see you.
Love what you're doing here, man.
I appreciate that. I'm glad that you're here for us. Rob, I think we just need to ask Charlie, right, to explain this thing for us.
Please.
Because I think we get the basics of you can buy players with cash in the league, but what does this mean, Charlie?
Listen, if you guys just read the 5-page single-space press release materials from the league, it's all very self-explanatory. A maximum of 4 hours and you'll be fine. You'll know everything that I know about it. Don't worry. It almost teaches itself. No, I'm being tongue-in-cheek, as we often are, around the MLS ephemera, of the rule book and the complexities and quirks of the rules and regs. But actually here we can tell a slightly different story because we're going in the opposite direction from maybe the stereotypical norm for MLS rule books. Things are getting simpler. Like, this is a new sort of pathway opening up that is simplifying things. It's allowing for a more basic cash transaction. And it's funny because we always stick MLS, right, thinking that there must be some kind of artificial or synthetic part of this process, but there's not. I mean, this is making things, I guess I would say, giving another option for clubs and really players. It increases the possibility for player movement. It's like most things with MLS, it's being sort of eased in gradually. So there's some guardrails put on it in the sense that things are limited. Clubs are limited to 2 inbound and 2 outbound cash trades under this new system. But that was the case with free agency, the MLS version of free agency when that opened up a few years ago, and many other aspects where there's a consensus has to be built in this league, the way it's structured and the way that things are discussed and evolved. But it's a positive step, I would say, on balance. And for that, you don't just need to talk to people around the league. Look at what the MLS Players Association is saying about it. They were involved in the negotiations. This was had a collective bargaining aspect to it because they had to sign off on it, and they released their own statement. Was it yesterday or the day before that showed that this stands to benefit players as well. Players are going to get a cut of the fee involved in when they're moving to another club, and they feel like this is a way to increase flexibility and freedom for the players as well.
So at this point, I mean, again, like you said, this is simplified on some level with the introduction of 2 incoming, 2 outgoing. Do we have a sense of what the market actually looks like? What's the demand, right? The competition committee, they wouldn't have done this, and I did read 6 years it took before they eventually decided to put this through. But this wouldn't have happened unless there was some demand. Do we have a sense? I mean, I think we could all kind of reason out, well, that owner likes to spend and this owner doesn't. Is it as simple as that, Charlie?
Well, you accurately point out that we don't really know what this is going to look like until the rubber hits the road, in the sense of an actual player or set of players that are the first to go. So that is interesting. Tom Bogert, who of course has been on the bleeding edge of the reporting of this, as with most other things around the league and beyond, pointed out that 2 names immediately popped up for him in these kind of informal conversations about what this might look like. You have disgruntled star players in Cincinnati in the form of Lucho Acosta right now, and Evander in Portland. You could see this being an elegant solution for those situations where, typically up until now, a player of that value, you would almost have to see them leave the league entirely for all parties to get closest to what they ideally want. In this situation, you could imagine a club like Atlanta United, which is they're flush in real cash thanks to Arthur Blank's investment, and they're flush in allocation cash thanks to a bunch of the transfers and the intelligent wheeling and dealing that Garth Lagerwey and his staff have done. They could go out and they can get, in MLS terms at least, they can get almost anyone they want. They have the biggest wish list, the biggest ambition in terms of upgrading their squad. They've got designated player slots open. So they could just go and tell the Portland Timbers, what's it going to take to get your MVP caliber playmaker to come over here and join us? So that would be something on that scale. But I think there will also be more mundane transactions as the sort of sample size opens up, because this is an opportunity to solve roster problems also. Now, a player's roster designation can't change as part of a cash trade, and there's limits. You can't get into the deeply NBA-ish, I guess, salary cap manipulations yet, at least from what we can tell. But there's just a way for clubs that have assets to move them more easily, and clubs that have spending power can put it to work quickly and more sort of elegantly, efficiently.
You said that this was kind of in the works, in the pipeline for 6 years or so, but it's been publicly announced in the second week of January. Did the clubs know this was coming out? Like, was this always in like the club's plans for 2025?
Well, as you mentioned, it's been talked about a long time. You could argue that it should have happened back in the summer, or could have happened a year ago. And I can think right away of some clubs and CSOs around the league who wish that this happened a week or two ago, because we're already forced to ask. For example, I'm in here in DC. DC United just ate a very costly, painful transaction to get designated player Mateusz Klich off their books just a week or so ago. He was shipped to Atlanta. He'll still occupy or eat up a designated player spot for DC United, but they were eager to get out from under his contract and get even a modicum of salary budget relief. So they're paying part of his salary and eating a DP tag for the season. And I haven't gotten to talk with Ali Mackay, their GM, yet, but I could imagine someone in his position being a little bit peeved that this rule wasn't put into official effect sooner. But you also have to believe that guys at that level, guys and girls at that level, know what's coming, right? The question is always what the sort of the machinery of the league, how quickly it processes it when the board level decisions are finally, stamped and sealed. So that, hopefully we'll get some reporting and some public statements. Some people will maybe pop off about that, but it hasn't happened yet. So I think the key thing here is technically the MLS transfer window, the primary window, the winter window hasn't opened yet. So this is happening before that's happened, even though we kind of perceive that we're well into the winter season, right? When we look at things globally, this is at least happening just as players are reporting to training camp. I've heard from more than one coach speaking this week that, right now we want to look at what we have in the opening days and weeks of preseason, and then we still have plenty of time with months left in the transfer window to go out and do the deals we think we need to. So again, the devil's in the details here when you look at the long tail that a big time transaction typically has, right? That can stretch over months or multiple transfer windows to get everything to the point of signing a deal and announcing it.
I want to go back, Charlie, to what you were talking about with the MLS Players Association. Obviously, for those of us who have been around long enough, we know it's not always been easy. Obviously, there's been labor negotiations and CBAs fairly recently, and we've had threats of lockouts and strikes and all those things. This has been the story of professional sports in America, but certainly with MLS. I mean, it feels like yesterday that Jimmy Conrad and the group that he was a part of figured out a way to get something that was kind of like free agency, and it was this massive breakthrough. And now we seem to be moving pretty quickly in ways that sort of undercut this idea of single entity and those things. But in terms of the Players Association, Charlie, you talked about the 10%. That's the global standard for a transfer when a player moves from one club to another, that the player receives 10%. I was surprised by that. I figured that they could toss this under the heading of single entity and say, well, you're not actually, your ITC is not moving, so the players don't get the 10%. And even outgoing transfers from MLS, for a very long time, players didn't get 10%. What does it say about where we are and sort of that balance, and sort of, again, the league's comfort with the solidity of single entity, that they can do things like this without worrying about what it means for that legal structure?
Well, right, there's something ironic about the fact that single entity is, you could argue it's worked and it's more entrenched than ever, but there's 30 distinct organizations within that single entity, and 30 clubs mean a wide and increasingly growing range of backgrounds and perspectives and kind of sensibilities about how things should operate and how they want to do things at the local level. So again, things do with MLS, things tend to move in a very sort of measured way, for better and sometimes for worse. But the MLSPA has had what I would say in general is a more of a partnership mentality with the league, at least over the last couple decades, than many of its sporting counterparts in North American sports. So they've tried not to, we've had drawn out, difficult, contentious CBA negotiations, but there hasn't been a full-on meltdown in the sense that you've seen in the mainstream American sports. And I think they would probably say, the MLSPA, that you're seeing the benefits of that now, right? There's a measure of revenue sharing. We don't know if or when that'll be triggered, but it is built into the CBA. The league's owners and investors seem more comfortable with a bullish mentality that reflects that things are still growing. There is a bigger cake, and that the players are part of the group that gets to meet that out, because they're stakeholders in a sense, if not shareholders.
That's encouraging that that players are getting a little bit more of a slice that they would elsewhere in different leagues around the world. Question from the comment section coming from Mike Thomas: does the team receiving cash pocket that, or does it get converted to general allocation money?
Yeah. So again, I've got the press releases open here. I'm not going to crib back to it. My understanding of this is that these funds are treated the same way that an external transfer to a club outside the league would be handled. So up to a point, a chunk of it becomes converted into GAM, but then after that cap, then it's basically, you could use it to improve your physical infrastructure. It could go into the owner's pocket, but there's a limit, although that limit has steadily grown over the years. But that a limited chunk of it can go back in as a form of salary budget relief.
Charlie, I guess there is sort of this grain of a thought that comes up with this. Like, again, and the league has made incremental steps towards an open market, right? Again, adding free agency via labor negotiations, getting to a point now where there's a cash market for players within the league. And we're tying this to GAM because GAM is such a big part of how clubs construct their rosters. But is there a reason to see this as the first step, or maybe a significant step, towards eliminating allocation money and turning this league into something that is just about pure dollars? I mean, I can't imagine the league will ever do away with a salary structure of some kind, a salary budget or cap, if you want to call it that. But is there a sense that moving away from these more arcane and bureaucratic notions of how to bring down your cap number is possible?
Well, yeah, and I should also mention here too, part of the answer, and something I don't want to get lost in all this, is the cash trades is one bullet point among almost half a dozen really that are sort of the way that the league is packaging these updates to the rules. So there's also more buyout possibilities, it may seem limited that you can only buy out 2 guaranteed contracts per year, but that's from 1 to 2 is a 100% increase. So again, gradiated improvement there. Maybe account against the idea that allocation money is going to go away is that expiration dates have now been taken off of GAM. It used to be you had a limited number of transfer windows. You had 3 full transfer windows in which you had to use it. That was seen as somewhat of an arbitrary restriction that was limiting the full sort of palette of options that clubs and their management had. So that's a gradual shift. The rules around homegrowns and how like second team players are brought up have been opened up, which I'm hoping is a good thing in terms of like how the league approaches the U.S. Open Cup, among other cup competitions outside of league play. There's fewer limitations on how homegrown players and young players coming up from the second team can be utilized before the club is required to offer them a first team contract. So this is sort of a wider thing, but I'm a little more bearish on the idea that GAM and TAM and that sort of thing are TAM I think its days are more numbered, but allocation money has a benefit in the sense that it's sort of, I think there's a perception at least that there's a significant number of sort of what I consider Moneyball or Moneyball adjacent clubs in the league who look around at all these big spenders and see a lot of waste, right? And see a lot of possibility for identifying undervalued assets in the shadow of the Atlantas or the Miamis. And for them, there's a little bit of gamesmanship here. They feel like they can outthink wealthier competition by sort of manipulating and managing these sort of various MLS quirks and details. And so I think that's a significant voting block that you're going to have to deal with if you're going to get to a point of consensus at the board level, because people, CSOs see that as a just the same way with the draft, right? Some teams absolutely punt the draft now gleefully, and others lean that much further into their investments in getting value from the draft because they see others overlooking it. So I think there's always going to be that spectrum there, which honestly makes the league more interesting, I would say, because it's just another reflection of the different ways of thinking.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, like, from your position as an American soccer writer covering largely Major League Soccer, is this something that excites you and gives you more meat on the bones for your writing and your readers?
Short answer, yes. I think there's a nuance in that I'm right in the middle on this, right? Because I see both sides of the wider debate about how MLS works, right? I understand that people get frustrated with what's seen as overly cautious mindset, sort of this very measured growth mindset. Whereas you can't argue with the effect that it had, a league that started, we're in year 30 now, right? With survival as the prime goal, right? A lot of these MLS quirks have worked as intended and do create a different competition from what we see around the world, maybe in big leagues in Europe, for example, where we're running up against the limitations of their ethos in terms of competitive balance. And, how interesting is the Bundesliga if Bayern wins 9 out of 10 years? And MLS is sort of at the opposite extreme, some would say. But there's so much that goes into that. And it even includes these this inside baseball type stuff, for lack of a better metaphor, that a lot of casual fans get mystified by. But this is all exists to try and create a sense of balance and also a sense of continuity and collective purpose off the pitch, outside of the competitive environment.
Thank you so much for spending time with us, Charles, letting us know about this new MLS Cash for Trades. Let the viewers know where they could find your reporting.
Yeah, so most of my work is on MLSsoccer.com these days. I'm sort of in the general migration away from Twitter and spending more of my time and more of my energy on Blue Sky, trying to get more into the other social media there. But check at CBOEHM on Blue Sky or MLSsoccer.com.
Thank you so much. A whole new era for Major League Soccer. Thank you so much. Everyone check out Charles' stuff online. Thank you so much for joining us here on Morning Kick Around.
Cheers, guys.